Hey everyone, this is Tingo welcoming you to a very special edition of the Marvel Strike Force Saturday Special. Happy New Year 2022 to all of you out there. Glad to have you, and thanks for joining me today. Alright, so today's video is going to be a clip show, and the point of the clip show is to demonstrate some of the best known matchups that are meant to be. In other words, these are the direct counters to the war defense teams that we're about to go through. We've got quite a large list today. I'm not going to list them all off here. Right out of the gate, though, I'd like to start with an RTA battle. Every once in a while, I'll hit record before I go for my daily RTAs. And I come across a battle that I kind of like and think I ought to share. And this one happens to be Power Armor versus Power Armor. So I thought that would be an interesting open. Now, while Power Armor versus Power Armor is going on, I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit more about what you're about to see later on in the video. First up after the RTA with Power Armor is going to be Infinity Watch versus Heroes for Hire, and I am sure everybody is sick to death of seeing videos about this or even seeing it in their war. But the reality is, until you have Omega Red, this is the way it's going to be. Infinity Watch is going to have to be dedicated to your Heroes for Hire teams. Now, I don't have Omega Red. I do have Sabretooth. I do have Wolverine. I did unlock both Lady Deathstrike and Silver Samurai, but I have not brought them up to snuff yet because I've been working on my raid teams, actually. So, Infinity Watch versus Heroes for Hire, that's going to lead us off. The next one after that's going to be Inhumans versus Red Skull. Now this is the initial counter brought to the game for the Red Skull Hydra team was Black Bolt, and the reason being he permanently kills characters. So you don't have to worry about Red Skull dropping a charge and reviving a minion. That's really annoying, and it takes a long time to get through that team. So if you had a 600k Red Skull Hydra team back in the day, without Black Bolt, you would be in a whole world of trouble because you'd have to outlast them. And that's what a lot of these war defense teams really are. It's all about the sustain or the revive mechanic or something like that. So we've got Red Skull Hydra, where Red Skull is summoning minions. When his minions that are originally spawned with him die, he revives them, unless there is some other character blocking that, like a Kestrel Ultimate or a Zemo Special, or Black Bolt himself on any given attack. So he was all about sustain, and he had a ton of resist, and he had a ton of armor because of his passive whenever he had minions out on the board. And so it was really, really difficult to target Red Skull himself. And there are some mechanics where he would actually respawn the next match with all of his charges back. So even if you got about halfway through him and tried to two-tap that system, there were mechanisms that allowed him to respawn with all of his charges and basically waste all of the time that you had used in order to get through the first half. So Black Bolt was really a game changer. And so here you've got Black Bolt and Inhumans team taking on Red Skull. Obviously my Black Bolt is massive. He's one of my favorite characters. I took him to DD4. And with a Black Bolt like that, you can expect to get through a Red Skull Hydra team pretty easily, especially if the minions are lower power. And once the minions are gone, Red Skull goes down quick. Alright, now we're on to the next matchup in our parade of correct counters with Shadowlands versus Marauders. Now, Shadowlands was a rework for Daredevil, Night Nurse, and Elektra, with the addition of Moon Knight and White Tiger. And so Shadowlands was really designed to destroy the Marauders team. Again, another sustained defense team. Now, Emma is an incredible healer. She's great at getting rid of your buffs and flipping them into debuffs. She's great at adding buffs to her team and stripping off debuffs. And if you run her with ISO for healer, she's one of the better healers in the game, believe it or not. And so then you have Mr. Sinister, who's got his two tricks. He's, number one, able to clone anybody on your team and grab a 6th attacker from your roster, or maybe a tank of some kind, or maybe a healer. It was always a toss-up when you're going up against them, but usually he would clone the one that you didn't need cloned. And so Shadowlands, most of their passives have the block of doing damage to other Shadowlands characters. So they really drop the amount of damage that they can deal to themselves, basically, and their teammates. So that was to counter both Sinister's clone, where he would get another character, and then you also have Mystique, who has the ability to cause one of your tunes to hit one of your other tunes. So that was the direct answer to Mystique as well. And then we have Strife. He's a thick tank, and he takes a very long time to get through if you're trying to punch through him. So now we have Elektra. She's got the ability to put a Disrupted out there, which is perfect for Strife. You can keep him disrupted. And then you also have, back to Mr. Sinister for a minute, his special, which has the ability to do a bunch of cleanse and healing for all of his villain mutant friends. So a ton of sustain, a ton of cleanse, and a thick tank to get through. Took a very long time. If there's more healing involved, then Strife may or may not go down, and unfortunately you have no choice but to really go after Strife early on if you didn't have Shadowlands. So Shadowlands was the first actual dedicated team answer, and it works out quite well with the cleanse from Night Nurse now clearing off all of the stuff that Emma's able to do. It's very helpful, and it's a great team. Next up, we have Black Order versus Kestrel Shield. When Kestrel was introduced to the game, she was given some synergies with Nick Fury, which was very nice, and it was because Kestrel's backstory includes being one of the founding members of Strike. Now, Kestrel obviously has no comic background before this game with Marvel. She's not actually a Marvel character. She's a Marvel Strike Force exclusive character. So they were able to do whatever they wanted with her origin story, and her origin story included Nick Fury and Strike Force. That said, the original War Defense team was a Nick Fury and Minions team. I remember when Nick Fury first came to the game, he was unlockable with a bunch of Kree minions, and it took forever to get all those Kree minions up to snuff to get Fury, and those who had Fury literally dominated the game, the same way that those who had a supremely high-powered Infinity Watch were able to dominate the game just recently. Now, they added a synergy with Nick Fury and Coulson. Coulson, of course, coming from the MCU and Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series. When Coulson was introduced, synergies were given to him and the S.H.I.E.L.D. minions as well. Specifically, we have the S.H.I.E.L.D. medic, who has that % chance to revive a character when she runs her special to heal. She will always resurrect Coulson. Again, using the same asterisk as you would use for any character killed by Black Bolt, for example, or Kestrel's ultimate. But in this case, you're basically stacking those S.H.I.E.L.D. synergies between Fury and Coulson and the S.H.I.E.L.D. minions with Kestrel, who happens to be one of the best characters in the game. And so there's not a lot of answers to Kestrel. Mirror matches with Kestrel versus Kestrel don't necessarily mean you're going to beat her. And so you have to come up with something that's a lot harder hitting. In this case, that a lot harder hitting is going to be Black Order. Now, Black Order, they've faded in predominance ever since Silver Surfer came to the game, ever since Infinity Watch came to the game. Black Order's basically done, but for a full year or so, they were the meta in the game. And they still have their uses. So there's a lot of people like me who have big Black Orders from when they were the meta. And those big Black Orders do come in handy when you have a massive Kestrel that you have to deal with, especially a Kestrel S.H.I.E.L.D. team. And so this is the correct matchup. You want to make sure that you're flipping the effects with Thanos' special. You want to make sure that you're getting some cleansing going because Fury can spread all those positive effects. If Fury does his special and spreads a bunch of positive effects, and then you can use your Thanos to flip all of those into negative effects, suddenly you've got something going here against the S.H.I.E.L.D. team, and you can work your way into focusing on just Kestrel. Alright, so here we have another Heroes for Hire. This is a 2-tap. If you don't want to watch this particular part of the episode, that is fine with me. You're going to want to head to the 2150-ish mark of the video for the next round. This 2-tap has, again, Infinity Watch going up against a Heroes for Hire, and the reality is my Infinity Watch just wasn't strong enough to cut it in the time allotted, so I took XForce to finish. And the reason I took XForce to finish is because I knew what was left of Heroes for Hire, and I had hoped that my XForce would be strong enough. This will give me a chance to talk a little bit about XForce. Specifically, there is the Negasonic Teenage Warhead, which is NTW for short, and then we've also got X-23. Those two characters are amazing together. My NTW, I ended up getting a 7 red star pull out of an orb. And so she's always been a very, very, very strong NTW. And my X-23, I really took quite some time to actually upgrade because I just didn't care about this team for the longest time. As it turns out, that was a very, very bad piece of judgment. These guys are great, and they're on my wish list to upgrade. If I ever had a bunch of gold and a bunch of training materials and a bunch of gear, that I could just throw away, because I would put NTW up there and I would bring up X23 as well. There, of course, is the domino effect, where Domino usually gets targeted right away by the AI, which is annoying, because she has that automatic revive mechanic for Deadpool. Again, same asterisk as before. If Black Bolt or maybe a Kestrel Ultimate takes him out, he's obviously not coming back. But Domino, for any other team, is going to bring Deadpool back every time he dies, as long as she's on the board. And it seems like the AI in this game knows that and kills off your Domino instantly every single time. It's almost as if there's a ghost taunt that we just can't see. So I'd probably thicken Domino. She's one of the squishiest players in the game, and she's definitely the squishiest on this team. Even at high gear and high star levels, she's a squish. So it doesn't take much. Even if the AI isn't intentionally targeting her, she's going to be gone. And then your guaranteed revival for Deadpool is gone as well. So in this case, the actual interesting part starts with the second half, with the cleanup efforts of XForce versus H4H. And I just wanted to add this video in to show that 2 taps are acceptable. For a lot of people, 2 taps are in fact the norm. Sometimes 3 and 4 taps can actually happen based off of how many charges are left after your first tap, on how many characters you have left to take out. This is a difficult matchup. Heroes for Hires is the best war defense team right now, and Omega Red is really the best answer for it. But again, if you're free to play like me, there's a very good chance you didn't get Omega Red the first time around. So we still have to deal with these 2 taps. It is acceptable. It is worth doing sometimes, especially if you can plow through a Heroes for Hire defensive team and give your alliance a chance to punch through a room that they really need, whether early or late. It's a little bit more beneficial if you can do it without using your Infinity Watch first, but in some cases Infinity Watch just doesn't have what it takes to get through it in the first run. And I will say I would love to put more T4s on mine to make it a lot more potent and a lot more powerful, but there's just too many new tunes coming out here. We just had Circe, we just had Icarus from the Eternals team. They're going to need some T4s, and I'm running low. And when it comes to raid teams, I've also got to get some T4s for my raid teams, because my alliance is starting to go into Doom raids, which is great. And I need to be able to help them out. So sitting back and putting more T4s on a team that is starting to get out of the arena meta, and a team that really doesn't necessarily need to be the only answer for the current war meta, it really doesn't seem like it's a wise place to put those T4s right now. So at this point, I'm just going to let you guys sit back and relax and watch this part of the video. Otherwise, go ahead and skip ahead. Again, 2150 is about where you want to be for the next one to start. So when Skeletary first came out, it was not a very good team in war. It was meant to be a counter to the Mercenaries team, and it just didn't cut it. Punisher, Killmonger, Yelena, Red Guardian, and Mercenary Soldier all together just did not have enough power to really become relevant. And shortly after Skeletary was completely released, Shadowlands began coming out. So a lot of people kind of gave up on Skeletary and just started to go with Shadowlands and start upgrading there. At that point, Scopely decided it was time to do something about it. They added the military tag to Black Widow so that she could be added to this team. They gave her a synergy with the Yelena, and basically you cut Killmonger loose from the team by doing that. That made a huge difference. They also did a couple of tweaks to some of the kits. Yelena has the ability to make sure that even if your team is blinded, it doesn't matter because she cranks your accuracy up to 100%, which means your team can still land all of its hits even while blinded, kind of like Daredevil can. The two things that I really want to note here are you do want Black Widow for the speed-ups, and you definitely want to T4 your Merc Soldier passive. It's a 40% additional damage to all Skeletary allies, so that T4 on a minion is actually worthwhile if you're going to use them for war. Up next is Guardians of the Galaxy versus Guardians of the Galaxy. And quite frankly, this is the only time I would recommend Guardians of the Galaxy being used on war offense unless your Guardians team happens to be 2 to 3 times larger in collection power to whatever team you're going after, and in some cases that's still not enough. The exception to that rule would be a punch across with Guardians of the Galaxy, same characters. You're going to want your Rocket and your Star-Lord to be higher than theirs. End of discussion. The Mantis, a really thick Mantis on defense versus a really thin Mantis on your side can cause a lot of problems in a mirror match. And a really thick Drax versus a really thin Drax on your side, same thing. So make sure your punch acrosses are almost identical in power, and you're going to want more Thunder in the Star-Lord and Rocket area than them. Basically how I would recommend going about this. The only other team that I would recommend in a punch across or even a slight punch down is Guardians of the Galaxy versus a hand team. Other than that, there's just nothing for this team to do. And so I threw this video in because it's one of the rare times that Guardians of the Galaxy actually wins something. That's not to say they won't get a rework in the future. There is a Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie coming out in the MCU at some point in the future, but until then they're going to be stuck in the dreg bin of Marvel Strike Force history. In any case, sit back, relax, and enjoy this matchup, and I will see you at the next video. So, speaking of mirror matches, we've got another one right here. This one's going to be Black Order versus Black Order. So, in the mirror match of Black Orders, what you're really going to want is a large Thanos, a large Cull Obsidian, and a large Ebony Maw. I have won this matchup many times where my Proxima and my Corvus were knocked out immediately, and the big three just kind of kept it going. Ebony Maw being huge doesn't directly impact how much health is stolen from the opponent. What it does do is it makes sure that he lasts long enough to actually do the stealing. The other consideration here is you basically want to use your Thanos special second. So if you get your second Thanos turn and your opponent hasn't used the Thanos special, you want to go with a basic. What that'll do is it'll put their Thanos out in front. The AI will always use the special as soon as it's available. And yes, that will give you a bunch of debuffs, and yes, it will probably slow down your Thanos, but when you come back around, you are going to be flipping all of the positive effects that they have accumulated over that time span into negative effects. You'll also likely be pulling people out of stealth mode so you can hit them again. So the considerations for this team, Black Order in war, beyond flipping second in a mirror match, you're going to want Proxima and Corvus to be striker-skirmisher combo. So those two assisting each other, one takes their basic attack, the other one adds the vulnerable, then the first one goes back and taps that vulnerable off with an extra hit. And basically that's all there is to this matchup. You flip second and everything else kind of comes natural. One other consideration is if you happen to see a Black Order out there in the war defense world and they are missing a Black Order tune, don't waste your Black Order on that. What makes Black Order so powerful is an empowered Thanos, and he only becomes empowered if all 4 of the Black Order characters are with him. Alright, enough of that mirror match nonsense. Now we're on to a little bit of meta explanation. Phoenix, when she first came out, was one of the best characters in the game, and she came out before Cyclops did, which meant that there was a Colossus, a Storm, a Psylocke, and a Wolverine to go with her. That was the original Uncanny 5. And then Cyclops came out, and Cyclops doubled down on what Phoenix was able to do damage-wise. Cyclops, of course, is a little bit of a squish, but for his time, he had one of the most powerful ultimates there was. And when you could get him to ult back-to-back with a Dark Phoenix ult, there was no teams that could stand up against them when they first came out. So even a team with a ton of heals, like the Fury Shield Minion team, which included Fury Special, which healed up all of their units and spread a bunch of positive effects, Shield Medic, which was able to heal the whole team, and had a 40% chance of reviving a dead toon, and Shield Operator, who was able to throw one of your toons into stealth mode with a couple of regenerations every 2 turns. There was a ton of regeneration on that team. So the back-to-back punches from the Uncanny X-Men absolutely obliterated that team in war. Now, of course, as the game has evolved, there are a couple of other teams that can punch across or even punch down slightly on the Fury Coulson Shield team, and we'll have another one a little bit later on in the clip show. But this was the original. Now, of course, they have added Kestrel to the team, and as we discussed earlier in the Black Order versus Kestrel Shield, if you throw Kestrel into the Shield Fury team, now you've got a problem for Phoenix, because Kestrel will stop the spawn of Dark Phoenix. As of the time of this recording, Magic has been announced, but not yet released, to join the Uncanny X-Men half of this matchup. And one of her abilities is to resurrect Dark Phoenix regardless of if Kestrel is opposing you. And it'll be very exciting to see what that new team can do once Magic is on the team. Alright, I promise you this is the very last time that I will be bringing you down the Heroes for Hire path on this clip show. If you would like to skip ahead to the next video, you're going to want to go to around the 35-minute mark. Now, the reason I'm bringing this one back again, Heroes for Hire, this goes back to one of the points I made in one of the earlier videos, which is, if you can take out a Heroes for Hire using anything but Infinity Watch, it's a win. In this particular case, the Heroes for Hire is 200k, and this is my old standby. The Inhumans Big 3, Silver Surfer, and Jessica Jones. Silver Surfer is there to strip charges, and he's going to be able to do it because some of these characters are only 20k, so even though their resistance is off the charts with all of these charges, it's only a percentage of what their base resistance is, and some of these characters' base resistance is very low. My Silver Surfer is huge, and I've got Blue ISO level 3 Skirmisher on him, so he's got plenty of focus to try and knock out charges. I consider being able to do this a huge win in war for both myself and my alliance, because it allows me to keep my Infinity Watch back and go for a bigger Heroes for Hire later. So to get down to the brass tacks of the theory on this, Jessica Jones is huge, again because I used to have a massive Defenders team, and I took her into DD3 with them. JJ's there to do what JJ does. Cleanse debuffs, and strip buffs off of opposing teams. She also acts as a battery, and hopefully she feeds Black Bolt. Black Bolt is huge. I took him into DD4. Black Bolt's there to do what he does best, which is hard kill opposing toons. So if I happen to get a kill with Black Bolt in any way, shape, or form before somebody has used up all their charges, they're not coming back. Crystal and Yo-Yo at Gear Tier 12 really don't play much of a role in here, other than Crystal has the second chance heal mechanism, and Yo-Yo has the little runaround taps that she does for a little bit of damage. If they were larger, they might be more of an impact, but really they're just here to soak up hits so that Black Bolt, JJ, and Silver Surfer don't have to. I don't see the 200k Heroes for Hire sticking around very long. I can imagine them starting to get upgraded into the 300, 400, 500k ranges, and at that point the resistance is so high with all the charges that even your best decked out Silver Surfer probably isn't going to be able to strip charges, and even if he is, the Heroes for Hire team is so fast that they're going to chew up and spit out this matchup on anything higher than maybe 250k Heroes for Hire. So the long story short on this particular matchup is it's a one-time kind of thing. It's likely not repeatable for anything above a 200k H for H, unless your attacking team is exponentially larger. Alright, now on to a fun matchup that I really enjoyed hitting. This is Kestrel Factor versus Marauders. Now, Kestrel, as we spoke about earlier, has a few really good uses, one of which is completely neutralizing Mr. Sinister, at least on his first ultimate in a matchup. When Kestrel has a charge, she will stop anything from being summoned or cloned, which will effectively render the first turn of Mr. Sinister useless. This is particularly helpful in a now ramped up Marauders team, especially due to the Weapon X upgrades of Sabretooth. In this particular case, we had a little over a 600k Marauders, and I do not have a Shadowlands that can take that team on. I just don't. My Shadowlands are roughly right around the 400 to 410 mark, depending on if the war buffs are up, and you'd really need something a little bit higher for this. So I went with Kestrel. Obviously, she's a great answer, but then you also need to put her on a team of 4 that can actually work somewhat together and do a lot of damage, because we've got 140k Emma, we've got 143k Sabretooth, 130k Mr. Sinister. I mean, these guys are no slouches, and on top of that, we've got a really thick Strife, which is a little over 110k. Getting through Strife in and of itself is going to be a chore, so the big thing is trying to get through all of these characters, and even though one-on-one, Emma will eventually lose to Kestrel, we're going to need to get to that point, which entails wiping out some really high-powered people. And in this case, I went with X Factor. I had a pretty beefy team. My Shatterstar and Longshot were already Gear Tier 15, took those guys into DD4 with me, so this is a really, really beefy team. So that was my goal here, was to use some muscle with X Factor and put Kestrel in there as well. There's the Cosmic Synergy, and we'll just see what happens here. I was pretty confident with this matchup, to be honest. I thought this was pretty piece of cake-ish. It worked out pretty well. I was very happy about the way it ended up, but this is one of those situations where I really think the X Factor team, as is in this video, could have probably punched up another 200k, just because Shatterstar and Longshot are so good. Now, one of the things you do have to worry about is your Shatterstar is going to be putting down debuffs and picking up buffs, and so you need to counteract Emma when she's doing her cleanse on your team from buffs, or, you know, her cleanse of debuffs on her team. Those are the two things you really need to watch out for here. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward matchup. Earlier, during the Uncanny versus Fury Coulson Shield video, I alluded to another Fury Coulson Shield counter. This is Brotherhood 2.0. The original Brotherhood was sort of built for this, but really not. Brotherhood 2.0 came around, and that freed up the Phoenix team to take on other targets, especially since the Brotherhood 2.0 team can take on the Fury Coulson Shield team so easily. The key to this matchup is you use Toad's special right out of the get-go to try and clear as many debuffs as possible. A lot of times the Fury Coulson Shield team will spawn with a bunch of immunity, and you want to get rid of that so that you can get Magneto's blind to land. Those are the two big things there. Once Magneto has sucked the team together into a clump, Blob and Pyro take over. Blob will do his belly flop, that's a huge AoE attack to anything close. Pyro will add some debuffs, and even on top of that, you'll have Juggernaut's Rush, which will just cut right through them. The theory behind defeating the Fury Coulson Shield team is, first and foremost, pivotal on taking out a Shield Medic if one is in that team. The reason being, the Shield Medic special will always revive Coulson. Coulson is one of the squishier characters. He does a lot of damage, but he's also one of the first to get knocked out if you're not intentionally focusing other places. The second thing you're going to want to do is use Magneto's special to disrupt shield security, or you might get stuck behind a taunt. If the shield security is not in the dead center between the other four characters, you can miss some of the characters that you really want to hit. A lot of the times I end up with Fury left over at the end, which, when he's alone versus a full 5, isn't that big of a deal. It used to be if you ever stuck solo against a Fury before the Uncanny X-Men, the healing, the summoning of minions, those things made him last a long time. So that's basically Brotherhood 2.0 versus Fury Coulson Shield in a nutshell. Alright, we're heading into the penultimate match here, and this one is Symbiotes versus Asgardians. Now, I've covered this before on Saturday Specials. I'll just give you the brief summary. When Asgardians first came out as a war defense team, they were the premier defense team. Seems like a trend with this video, giving you the backstory of all these premier war defense teams that have fallen from grace, but in reality, Thor, Hela, Loki, goodbye. I mean, it was almost impossible to get through Asgardians, and especially when you didn't have a lot of choices. Right now, we've got a ton of war offensive teams, and we've got a bunch of raid teams that actually work well on war offense against some of these, what I will call, legacy war defense teams. And Asgardians is definitely one of them, and Symbiotes is definitely a raid team. So, at one point, I actually had Symbiotes that were higher power than the Asgardians that I was seeing, and I was still losing that match. And from the community of Marvel Strike Force, I learned that Symbiotes should be able to punch up massively. Nobody told me how. The long and short of it was, for me, Hela would get trapped behind stealth mode. I would be able to clear up the rest of the team, she'd be stuck in stealth, summoning Gregs all the time, and because I was killing Gregs constantly, she was never increasing her turn meter. With the Symbiotes, Carnage's passive specifically, every time an opposing toon dies, you get a ton of speed up. And so you're just getting speed after speed after speed after speed, and you're going and going and going and going, and sometimes those Symbiotes would hit 3 times, and then you go to the next Symbiote. They'd kill 3 different Gregs. All the while, Hela is summoning new Gregs and still in stealth mode, and I can't get to her with anything but splash damage. And what would ultimately happen would be I would time out. It's not from a lack of power, it was from a lack of being able to get to Hela. So what I figured out is the best way to get through it is to hit the Gregs early. What you're trying to do is get ahead of the Asgardian turn meter. You do not want to get stuck behind Sif's taunt, and you do not want to get Hela into stealth mode. Best way to do that is to disrupt Hela. You can disrupt Hela with Scream's ultimate, you can ability block Sif with Venom's special, and you can stun Thor with Symbiote Spider-Man's ultimate. Another viable option is to disrupt Loki. Either way, what you really want to do is get rid of that stealth option. Once stealth is off the table, which is Loki's passive, you've got it home free. It doesn't matter how many Gregs Hela summons, as long as you can focus on Hela when she's alone and there are 5 Gregs on the map. You will ultimately win. And that brings us to the final match. This one I call the Silver Surfer Challenge. This video came about because it was late one war. We had the victory pretty much wrapped up, and I had tons of tunes and tons of teams left, and so I thought I would try Silver Surfer alone versus an entire team. And I picked out Brotherhood 2.0. My Surfer was 120k. The Brotherhood 2.0 was a total of 300k. Here's how that turned out. As always, thanks for watching the Tingo MSF Saturday Special, and a very happy New Year to you and all of your family this New Year's Day 2022.